Hey folks, I'm here to shoot a different type of video tonight. This video is being made at the request of a friend of mine who has an inner city mission. And I guess they do a podcast, and he wanted a particular humorous story from the time when I was a monitor at a homeless shelter, which I did for about 17 years. And so this video, I'm making it so that they can rip the audio and for their podcast. Now, Jake, are you gonna let me talk tonight, or are you gonna interject your own 2 cents? Okay. So, just a little background. I came to Louisville in '94 after college. I went to the Kentucky Baptist Convention and got a couple referrals for places that might allow me to work kind of in a residential capacity, and they told me a couple places, which was one of them was the center that I went to. So I worked at this center for almost 2 years before I went full time there, and when I did go full time, which was in January of '96. They also implemented a new residential program called Fresh Start, which was aimed primarily at homeless men who are mentally ill. There were some dual diagnoses as well, which would be men who are men who have mental illness and substance abuse issues. So, back then, it was quite an adventure. I really didn't have anybody that I was following as kind of an example of what to do in a lot of situations, and some situations were just they were just so out of the norm that how do you really prepare for them? On one particular occasion, I had an apartment on site. It was on the 3rd floor of the center, and of course, being a live-in staff, there would be times when people would knock on the door, either residents or someone would knock on the door. There would be situations I'd have to handle, and that job kind of agreed with me. But there were just some moments that you just can't really prepare yourself for. One afternoon, I was just doing my daily routine, and there was a knock at the door. And when I got to the door, it was the Louisville Police Department. And I was a little surprised because, being on the 3rd floor, there were quite a few locked doors. I don't know, probably a resident had let them up on the 3rd floor, but they told me there was a disturbance. They had been called about a disturbance. They wanted to investigate. And so so let's go find out what's going on. So I shut the door and went with the officers down the hallway, and it didn't take us but a minute to find where the disagreement was coming from. on the third floor there was very little carpeting and not a whole lot of furniture, so voices tend to echo, especially if they were less than pleasant voices, less than pleasant tones. So we followed the voices to one of the dorms, and we discovered two of the residents having a rather heated discussion about who Jesus was. Now, typically that discussion would be followed by questions like, who was Jesus? Was he the Son of God? Was he a prophet? Was he just a teacher? But that wasn't this discussion. In this discussion, or this argument, one resident was telling the other resident, I am Jesus. And the other resident was telling him, no, I told you that I'm Jesus. And this went back and forth for a second before I interjected and told them, ain't neither one of you Jesus, and I don't want to hear any more about it. Which effectively stopped the debate. And I immediately thought, did I really just say that? One guy walked off. He was a little miffed. The other guy was apologizing to me, and I let him know, hey, it's okay, but we can't be arguing like this where we get the police involved. We have to be calm and deal with the things. And he was okay, and the other gentleman was okay as well. And there were no more incidents, but I really I really can't emphasize enough how much that conversation amused me. It just really is not the type of thing that you expect the type of conversation you expect to have in a given day. Since we're only about 8 minutes in, let me give you one more story that's kind of humorous. This was from a little later in my years there. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. I had just shut down the day shelter. On Saturday mornings, we would open up the day shelter, and a church would come in and cook lunch for our homeless population at large. And that all went well. But as soon as we shut down the day shelter, well, actually, maybe a little time had passed, but I had a volunteer with me. His name is Josh, and he works. I think he's now on staff at a local church, and so Josh was still there. And one of our residents, we had a couple of primarily Spanish-speaking residents that lived at the center at that time, and they kind of came and were telling me that they had been threatened by one of the other residents. And, so I wanted to find out the nature of it, but there was a problem. This one resident's English was very broken, and just not a lot there that you could grab a hold of. He did use the word pistola a couple of times, which got my attention. And so I'm quizzing him about the pistola. And finally he says, gun. Oh boy. So you can't tell. So he could not tell me whether or not this guy that had threatened him actually had a gun. So the first thing I did was call the police, and I requested for a Spanish-speaking officer to come and talk to this resident so that we could find out exactly what he's talking about. And she was quite lovely. In fact, I started to think that perhaps I would ask for Spanish-speaking officers regardless of the nature of my calls in the future. But I digress. So they sent this officer. She quizzed this resident about the gun. I don't know that we ever got a firm idea whether this gentleman would have a weapon or not. Now I have to back up. In between the initial incident where he told us about the threat to the time when the cops actually got there, there was a little bit of time passed. And there were three of our guys, all residents of this program, for men who are homeless and have mental illness, present. And so after I called the police, my next thought was, there's no sense, if I don't know if this guy has a gun, there's no sense in myself and Josh and three other residents to all be in the line of fire if that is the case. So I had Josh go into the office with three residents while I went outside, because the way the center was set up, we had there were doors that you couldn't get through, so I went outside to wait for the cops. Well, alright, so obviously the cops came. The Spanish-speaking officer talked to the resident, and we weren't really able to determine. We didn't think that he had seen an actual gun, but we didn't know if this guy had somehow gotten a hold of a gun or not. But we kind of had to search the grounds. And he was standing out back behind the building under an awning, and did not have a gun, thankfully. But he had, in fact, threatened a gun. So the police talked to him. His language was enough to where I guess they realized that he needed, and I don't know, it's been a while now, so I can't remember if he uttered another threat, but anyway, I do remember that criteria was met that they could take him to Central State, which is a hospital here in town for the mentally ill. But there for a minute, it was quite exciting with the notion that maybe a pistola was involved. Yeah. Now, the other humorous aspect to this story, and maybe maybe my storytelling sucks because maybe you had to be there, but I went back and talked to Josh because, you know, I had some long moments standing in front of the building, not oblivious to the fact that if this guy did have a gun, he could walk around the corner, and then where would I go? You know. So I asked Josh, how was it in the office? And apparently he had quite the time trying to keep the other three guys entertained and calm, and he let me know how long it felt like it took for the police to get there. So, but I really appreciated Josh that day. It really takes a, you know, I was there, I was getting paid, I was staff, but Josh was just a volunteer, so for him to go above and beyond was really cool. But yeah, those are a few of the things that a couple of stories of things that happened while I was working in a homeless ministry. So, you know, I'm going to put this up so that they can, if they want to use that first story, they can. So I will talk to you soon. I do have some music related videos coming up. They will be music collection videos. I took a trip last week. If those of you who are connected to my Facebook page or my Instagram page know that I was out of town and at my favorite gospel singer did a weekend, and there was a stop before the actual event and a stop afterward where I picked up records and CDs, and I'll show you those. And I also picked up some music at the actual event. Now, those videos will differ still from what I normally do because the experiences, I want to talk about my experiences and some of the people that I met at this at the Russ and Tori Taft Bell Buckle weekend, and I don't want to shortchange that. And so while I will be showing music, I'll be talking too about my experiences. And because it was a Christian event, I've tried not to preach in these videos, and I'm not a preacher. I don't do that. But I will be talking very transparently, and Jesus' name will come up in those videos. So I'll try to let you know where you can see just the music if that's what you want to do. But I'm excited about trying to do those videos, and I hope to do that this weekend. So hope you all have a great night, and I'll see you soon.